Welcome to our deep dive all about sustainable living in temperate climates.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
I know, right? We're going to explore Chapter 2 of Sustainable Living Across Climates,
Okay.
which you were kind enough to share with us.
Yeah, yeah.
It focuses on how people can really thrive
Right.
in those regions that have those distinct four seasons.
Mm.
So we're talking hot summers, cold winters, and everything in between.
Yeah, the lovely transitions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll be unpacking building design, water conservation, energy solutions,
Okay.
and even how these climate patterns actually influence agriculture.
Cool.
Get ready for some surprising facts and practical insights along the way.
What's so interesting about this is, so many of us live in these temperate zones, but we often overlook the subtle ways that these climates really influence our daily lives and the choices we make.
It's true. You know, it's easy to just focus on the obvious stuff.
Totally.
Oh, grab a coat in the winter. But this deep dive is really about digging into those less obvious details.
Right, right.
So let's start with those temperate climate basics.
Okay, so picture this. A region with 4 distinct seasons, right?
Yeah.
That's your classic temperate climate. But, beyond just those obvious temperature shifts, there's like a whole other layer of nuance that often gets missed.
Yeah.
So, take those frost cycles, for example. They can be really sneaky, popping up in spring and fall.
Ugh, yeah.
And they have a huge impact on what you can grow and when.
That's so true. I've learned that the hard way many times with my garden.
I bet. And, wind is another big one. Whether you're inland or on the
Yeah.
coast, those wind patterns, they can be dramatically different. And that influences everything from how we design our homes to what energy choices make sense.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't forget about daylight hours, those long summer days, the short winter nights.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny how we take those for granted.
we do. Yeah.
But that shifting daylight, it has a ripple effect on so many aspects of sustainable living.
It totally does.
Right, like the angle of the sun changes throughout the year.
Yeah.
And that impacts how we design our homes for passive solar heating and cooling.
Mhm.
And, in agriculture, those long summer days give certain crops a real boost,
Right.
while others actually thrive in those shorter days of spring or fall.
It's like the climate sets the stage.
Yeah,
And then we got to figure out how to best work with it. Yeah.
exactly. It's all about adapting, right? Adapting our approach to fit those very specific climate patterns.
Right.
And that's where things get really interesting, especially when we start to look at sustainable building in temperate zones.
Okay, let's talk about buildings. I love the idea of creating a home that's comfortable year round without having to rely
Right.
on those energy guzzling AC and heating systems all the time.
For sure. And that's where passive solar design comes in. So imagine a house, right? And it's designed to naturally capture heat in the winter, and then in the summer it stays cool.
Okay, yeah. So I'm picturing like big south-facing windows
Yes.
that let in all that glorious winter sunlight.
Absolutely.
But how do you keep all that warmth inside?
Right. So that's where insulation is key.
Okay.
We're talking about materials that actually resist the flow of heat. So keeping those warm winter temperatures in and
Yeah.
preventing any heat loss.
So would you say the higher the R value of the insulation,
Yes.
the better it is at resisting that transfer?
Yes, exactly. So higher R value equals a cozier house in the winter.
Yes. I like that. But insulation alone can't work miracles.
You're right. We also need to consider something called thermal mass.
Okay.
So materials like concrete or brick, even stone, they have this high thermal mass, which means they can absorb and store a lot of heat energy.
So it's like building a thermal battery into your house.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. So during the day, you've got those south-facing windows, right?
Right.
They allow sunlight to come in and heat up those thermal mass materials. And then as the temperature drops at night, that stored heat slowly releases back into the house.
Wow.
Keeping everything nice and cozy.
That's brilliant.
So it's pretty cool, huh?
It is.
Yeah.
But what about keeping cool in the summer?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm guessing those big windows could turn your house into like a greenhouse.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, if they're not careful.
Yeah, you're spot on. That's why passive solar design also involves things like overhangs or awnings,
Right, right.
strategically placed above the windows to shade them
Mhm.
during those hot summer months.
Mhm.
And we can leverage natural ventilation,
Yeah.
using things like operable windows
Uh,
or even skylights that are placed to encourage those cooling breezes.
It's so smart.
Yeah, so it's all about working with the climate, using its natural patterns to
Mm-hmm.
create a comfortable and energy-efficient home.
That's amazing. And that same principle applies to water management in temperate climates, right?
Exactly. You get a good amount of rainfall throughout the year in these regions,
Right, right,
but it's not always evenly distributed.
right.
You might have periods of abundant rainfall,
Yeah.
and then you get those dry spells, and you're looking at your wilting garden, wishing you had saved some of that precious rainwater.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
So what can we do to kind of even out
Right.
those water highs and lows?
Yeah. Well, rainwater harvesting can be a game changer.
Okay.
It's really as simple as collecting that rainwater from your roof
Okay.
and storing it for later use.
So I'm picturing like those classic rain barrels,
Right.
but are there other ways to do it on a larger scale?
Absolutely. So if you have a larger property
Oh.
or even community scale systems, you can install cisterns.
Okay.
So these are large underground tanks that can hold thousands of gallons of water.
Wow. So you're basically creating a water bank?
Yeah, exactly. Saving that rainwater for those drier times.
But what about when there's too much water?
Oh, right.
Like what about those heavy downpours and potential flooding?
That's a great point. That's where landscaping and design solutions come in. Bioswales, for example. Have you ever seen those?
I think so.
Okay, so they're landscape ditches or depressions that help slow down and absorb stormwater runoff. So
Yeah.
they're kind of like sponges, soaking up that excess water and preventing it from overwhelming the drainage system.
So it's not just about dealing with water scarcity,
Right.
but also managing those times of abundance
Yes.
and protecting against flooding.
Exactly. And those same principles of working with nature,
Right.
right, rather than against it,
Right.
those are also at the heart of sustainable agriculture in
Uh-huh.
temperate climates.
Let's talk about food. I'm so curious how these climate patterns
Yeah.
affect what we can grow
Yeah.
and how we can keep those farmlands
Yeah.
healthy and productive,
Yeah.
for years to come.
Well, one of the most important strategies for sustainable agriculture in these regions is crop rotation.
Okay.
So imagine a farmer, right? They plant corn one year, which is a really heavy nitrogen feeder.
All right.
The next year, they might plant legumes like beans or clover,
Mm-hmm.
which actually fix nitrogen in the soil.
So it's like a natural fertilization system almost,
Exactly.
where the crops kind of work together to
Yeah.
replenish the soil.
Exactly. And it's about understanding the nutrient needs of those different crops and creating this cycle
Right.
that maintains that soil fertility
Yeah.
over the long term.
Wow.
Plus, by changing the crops each year, you disrupt the life cycles of any, pesky insects or pathogens that might target a specific crop.
Oh, that's so smart. You're outsmarting those pests
Right. You got it.
with a well-planned planting strategy.
Yeah.
But what if we take that concept of natural synergy
Okay.
a step further?
I like where you're going with this. That's where companion planting comes in.
Oh, yeah, companion planting.
Yeah. So it's all about pairing plants that naturally benefit each other.
Okay.
So, for instance, planting basil near tomatoes can actually help repel insects that might damage those tomato plants.
Wow.
Some people even say it improves the flavor.
That's amazing. So it's like Mother Nature's version of pest control and flavor enhancement all in one.
Exactly. And, some companion plants can attract beneficial insects,
Oh, right.
like pollinators, which are essential for, fruit and vegetable production.
So it's all about creating like a really diverse
Yes.
and thriving ecosystem in your garden.
Exactly. Just like in nature.
And speaking of natural cycles and recycling,
Oh, yeah.
we can't forget about composting.
Oh, yes.
Turning kitchen scraps and yard waste into that like rich, dark compost.
It's like nature's own magic trick.
Oh, I'm a composting fanatic. It's amazing how that stuff
I love that.
transforms,
It's so cool.
It's like this nutrient-rich gold for the garden.
Exactly.
It's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
You're helping your garden thrive, and you're reducing the amount of waste that's going to landfills.
That's right. Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about energy in temperate climates. So I know solar energy is often associated with those really sunny climates.
Right.
But can it really be effective in a region that has those shorter winter days?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's where things get, a little more complex.
Okay.
Solar panels are fantastic for those long summer days
Yeah.
in temperate zones, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we do have to think about what happens when those days get shorter and the sun's intensity decreases.
So it's like a seasonal balancing act. You've got abundance in the summer,
Right.
but you really got to plan for those
Okay.
winter months.
Exactly. And that's why energy storage is absolutely crucial. And thankfully, battery technology is advancing so rapidly.
Right.
Imagine, like, pairing your solar panels with a Tesla Powerwall.
Oh, wow.
It's like you're banking sunshine for a rainy day, literally.
Yeah.
I love that. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So you capture all that solar energy in the summer
Yeah.
and then tap into that stored power
Exactly.
when the sun isn't quite as strong.
You got it. Now, what about other renewable sources?
Yeah.
Can wind power play a role in temperate climates?
Yeah, I mean, I know certain regions, like along coastlines and mountainous areas,
Right.
they experience pretty consistent wind.
Exactly. And those are the perfect locations for wind turbines.
Okay.
They harness that energy, convert it into electricity.
So you got solar and wind kind of working in tandem.
Exactly, complementing each other.
What about hydropower? I know that requires rivers and streams, but can that be a viable option in temperate climates?
Absolutely. In some cases, yes.
Okay.
If the region has like a consistent water source and sufficient elevation changes,
right,
hydropower can be incredibly reliable and sustainable.
Wow. It's amazing how diverse that renewable energy landscape can be in these regions. But I got to ask, what happens when the sun isn't shining, the wind isn't blowing, and you don't have access to hydropower?
That's where we have to get creative with our energy mix. And that brings us to another fascinating topic: thermal energy storage.
Okay, thermal energy storage.
Yeah.
I remember you mentioning that when we were talking about building design.
Right.
But how does it work on a larger scale?
So picture this: a system that uses excess electricity generated during, say, those sunny or windy periods to heat up a massive tank of water or even molten salt. And then that stored heat energy, well, it can be used to generate electricity.
Oh, wow.
When those renewable sources aren't available, or it can even be used to directly provide heating for buildings.
So like a giant thermal battery. That's so innovative. But what if you're in a region that doesn't really have access to those traditional renewable sources? Are there other options?
That's where biomass energy comes in.
Biomass. Okay, remind me how that works.
So it's all about using organic matter, things like wood or agricultural residues, as fuel.
Okay.
And it's particularly relevant in rural areas where those resources are readily available. Imagine a community, right? They heat their homes and businesses using wood pellets sourced from sustainably managed forests.
That's so cool. So even in areas that don't have those ideal conditions for solar or wind, there are still sustainable options.
Yeah, and let's not forget that energy efficiency is key.
Oh, right.
Properly insulating your home, choosing energy efficient appliances, even just being mindful of our energy use, all of these things can significantly reduce our energy demands, which makes those renewable sources go even further.
It's like that saying, the greenest kilowatt hour is the one you don't use.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered sustainable building, water management, and energy solutions, all tailored to the unique features of temperate climates.
And one of the things I find so fascinating is how interconnected all these elements are. We can't just think of them in isolation, right? They all work together to create a more sustainable and resilient way of life.
Yeah, it's like a web.
Exactly.
Each thread strengthening the others.
And it's not just about, environmental benefits. It's about creating healthier, more vibrant communities where people can really thrive.
This is all so insightful, and I am eager to dig into some specific case studies.
Me too.
Of how these principles are being put into action.
Yeah, there are some really inspiring examples out there of communities and individuals who are embracing these ideas and transforming their lives for the better.
I can't wait to hear about it.
Welcome back to our deep dive on sustainable living in those wonderful temperate climates.
Oh, it's good to be back. I'm ready for more.
Me too. Before we jump into those case studies, I think it's worth circling back to energy for a minute.
Okay, energy. What else should we be thinking about?
So, sustainable living across climates really emphasizes diversifying our energy sources.
Right.
It's not about picking one renewable option and just calling it a day,
It's more like creating a portfolio of those sustainable solutions.
Yes, having a mix.
And they all kind of play a role in meeting our energy needs.
Exactly. So in addition to solar, wind, and hydropower, there's also geothermal energy.
Oh, yeah, geothermal. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so basically beneath the Earth's surface, there's this constant temperature regardless of the season.
That's right. It's like tapping into the Earth's natural heat.
Exactly. And we can actually harness that heat to warm our homes in the winter.
Wow.
Or even generate electricity using geothermal power plants.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. It's really cool technology. And I think what we're seeing here is that it's not just about those big, flashy renewable projects.
Right.
It's also about these smaller scale,
Right.
more localized solutions.
Yeah, like finding what works best for
Exactly.
each community.
Yeah, being adaptable, finding that right mix for each specific location. But even with all these renewable options,
Yeah.
we still have to be mindful of energy efficiency.
Right. It all comes back to that.
It does. It's like you said earlier, the greenest kilowatt hour is the one you don't use.
It's so true. Okay, so much of it comes down to making those smart choices
Yeah.
about, how we design our homes,
Right.
the appliances we use, even our everyday habits.
Absolutely.
It's not just about the technology.
Right.
It's also about those, like, behavioral changes,
Yeah,
right?
it is. It is.
And being more conscious of our energy consumption.
And those small actions really do add up over time. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about sustainable agriculture and food security in these temperate climates.
Food. This is something I'm really passionate about.
Oh, me too.
I love this idea of growing food locally,
Yeah.
supporting sustainable farming practices, but
Right.
I'm also a little concerned about like the impact of climate change
Right.
on food security.
That's a really important point. And, sustainable living across climates highlights some fascinating strategies for adapting to that changing climate
Okay.
while also building a more resilient food system.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about these strategies.
Well, one approach is to focus on drought-tolerant crops.
Okay.
Because, as temperatures rise and rainfall patterns become less predictable,
Right.
we need to be able to grow food that can thrive
Yeah.
in those drier conditions.
So it's like almost like planning ahead.
Exactly. Selecting crops that are adapted to,
Right.
what those future climate scenarios might look like.
Okay, so what kind of crops are we talking about here?
So in temperate regions, there are certain varieties of beans, squash, even grains
Okay.
that are just naturally more drought resistant.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And there's like a whole field of research dedicated to actually developing new crop varieties that can withstand, hotter temperatures and less rainfall.
So it's like science is coming to the rescue.
Yeah.
Helping us adapt to a changing world.
Exactly. And it's not just about the crops themselves, right?
Right.
We also need to rethink our farming practices.
Okay.
No-till farming, for example, is a technique that minimizes soil disturbance, which helps to retain moisture and improve soil health.
I've heard of that, no-till farming. Yeah. So it's about leaving those crop residues on the soil surface.
Exactly. It acts like a mulch, reducing evaporation, protecting the soil from erosion.
Okay.
And it even helps sequester carbon in the soil.
Wow. So it's a win for the climate as well.
Exactly. A win-win.
It's amazing how these, seemingly small changes can have such a big impact.
Yeah, those little tweaks. Now, another key strategy is diversifying our food systems.
Okay, diversification.
Yeah. So imagine a community that relies really heavily on a single crop, right?
Okay.
If that crop fails, due to drought or disease, it could have a devastating impact.
That makes sense. So it's almost like spreading the risk by growing a wider variety of things.
Exactly. And it's not just about crop diversity, it's about supporting local farmers, creating shorter supply chains, and building community resilience.
Because it's almost like taking that concept of a diversified portfolio and applying it to food.
Absolutely. It's about creating this food system that's more adaptable, less vulnerable to those external shocks, whether they're, climate related or economic.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And it's about recognizing that interconnectedness between our food choices and the health of the planet. And speaking of interconnectedness, one of the most fascinating aspects of sustainable living in temperate climates is how these principles can be applied, not just to rural areas, but also to those urban environments.
Oh, urban sustainability, yes. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk about solar panels on rooftops and rainwater harvesting in like suburban backyards, but how do these concepts actually translate to like those dense cityscapes?
Well, that's where things get really creative.
Okay, I love it.
Right. Cities, They might not have vast farmlands or rushing rivers,
Right.
but they have their own unique opportunities for sustainable living.
So I'm thinking like rooftop gardens,
Yeah.
vertical farms, all that.
Exactly. Imagine those concrete rooftops, right?
Yeah.
Transformed into these lush green spaces, producing fresh food right in the heart of the city.
That's amazing.
And with vertical farms, we can actually grow food indoors using these really innovative techniques like hydroponics and LED lighting.
So cool. So it's about finding those pockets of opportunity, right?
It is reimagining that urban landscape.
Okay, so it's not just about food production.
Right.
I mean, cities can also implement rainwater harvesting systems,
Absolutely.
like to capture that runoff from buildings.
Yes. And then use it for irrigation or, even non-potable water needs.
Oh, right, like flushing toilets and things. Yeah, that's a great idea. And, I've seen some cities that have started to incorporate green roofs,
Oh, yeah.
which not only provide insulation, but they also help absorb rainwater
Right.
and reduce that urban heat island effect.
Exactly. It's all about being creative, right?
Right.
Finding solutions
Yeah.
that work within the constraints of that urban environment.
And let's not forget about transportation.
Oh, right.
I mean, cities are often hubs for, public transportation, cycling, walking.
all those sustainable alternatives.
Yeah, to those car-centric lifestyles.
Exactly.
This is amazing.
Yep.
It's incredible how these concepts of sustainable living can be adapted
Yeah.
and applied, in so many different contexts.
It is.
Whether it's, a rural homestead or a bustling city,
Right.
it's all about finding those creative solutions
Right.
that work within
Yeah.
the constraints of each environment.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating, right?
Totally.
It's not about, prescribing a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
It's about understanding these principles
Yeah.
and then finding those tailored solutions that work for each unique situation.
Okay, I'm inspired. But before I run off and install solar panels on my roof and start a rooftop garden,
Yeah.
I have to ask, what are some of the challenges that people in temperate climates face when they're trying to live more sustainably?
That's a great question.
Like, are there any roadblocks we should be aware of?
Yeah, because it's not always smooth sailing on this journey towards sustainability.
Let's be real. Every path has its bumps.
Exactly. And understanding those challenges
Mm-hmm.
can really help us find solutions
Yeah.
and create a smoother path forward. So one thing that Sustainable Living Across Climates points out is that the initial cost
Right.
can be a barrier.
Yeah.
Things like installing solar panels or a geothermal heating system can require a significant upfront investment.
Right. That's a lot of money sometimes.
It is, and that can be a deterrent for some people, even if those solutions ultimately offer,
Right.
long-term cost savings.
Yeah. But thankfully, there are things like government incentives and tax credits.
Exactly. And even some community-based financing models that are emerging.
So it's all about kind of exploring those options,
Yeah.
finding ways to make it more accessible.
Exactly. Now, another challenge can be those existing building codes or zoning regulations.
Mhm.
Some areas might have these outdated rules
Right.
that make it difficult to actually implement certain sustainable practices.
That's so frustrating.
It can be.
Yeah.
For example, it might
Mm.
be tricky to install a rainwater harvesting system
Right.
if the local codes don't allow for it.
Wow. So sometimes it's not just about individual willingness.
Right.
It's also about those larger systems
It's
and advocating for change
Yes.
at a policy level.
Absolutely. Another thing is just awareness and education.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
A lot of people just aren't aware of the options that are out there.
Right.
Or, they might have misconceptions about what sustainable living actually means.
Yeah. It's easy to feel overwhelmed
Yeah.
or not even know where to start.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to have those resources and support systems in place,
Wow.
Whether it's community organizations, educational programs, or even just, neighbors sharing their experiences.
I love that. It's about building those networks of support
Yeah.
and fostering a culture of sustainability.
And remembering, you're not alone in this journey. There are so many people out there who are working towards this,
Yeah.
more sustainable future.
It's a collective effort.
It is. It's about individuals, communities, governments,
Right.
all working together.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive this has been.
I know, right?
It's amazing how much we've uncovered just by exploring chapter 2 of sustainable living across climates.
Mhm.
We went from those subtle climate patterns
Right.
to these big picture solutions for building water, energy, food,
Yeah.
all tailored for those of us living in temperate zones.
It's amazing. And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know. It's true. There's so much more
Yeah.
to explore, even within like this one chapter.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I think that's what's so exciting about this deep dive approach.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about overwhelming you with information.
Right.
It's about sparking that curiosity.
Exactly.
And empowering you to kind of delve deeper into the topics that really resonate with you.
Absolutely. And, one thing I really hope you take away from this conversation
Yeah.
is that sustainable living isn't about perfection.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about doing everything perfectly right from the start.
That's so important.
It really is. It's about progress, not perfection.
I love that. So it's really those small steps, right?
Yeah.
Those everyday choices that add up
Exactly.
over time
They really do.
to make a real difference.
You got it. Whether it's, choosing energy efficient appliances or planting some herbs and pots on your balcony or just being mindful of your water usage.
Right.
All those little things add up.
Yeah, and it's about finding those solutions
Yeah.
that really fit your lifestyle,
Right.
your unique circumstances.
Totally. What works for one person might not work for another. And, that's okay.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it.
Right. Sustainable living is adaptable. It's customizable.
Yeah.
It's about finding the strategies that resonate with you, that you can integrate into your daily life.
So for everyone listening out there, don't be intimidated by, this big world of sustainable living.
Yeah, don't be scared.
Start small, experiment, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right.
And learn from others.
Exactly. You are not alone in this journey.
Right.
There are so many people, communities, organizations out there working towards a more sustainable future.
I love that. Connect to them, share your experiences, and like you said, create a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Positive change.
A ripple effect. I love that image.
Me too. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those sustainable ripples flowing.
Yes.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time, stay curious and keep striving
Yes.
for that more sustainable and fulfilling way of life.